Hello, welcome to Exclam Chess. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at a game that was sent in to me by the user Knight2607 on chess.com. Okay, so let's take a look at his game. d4, d5. He was playing as the white pieces, by the way, in case you were wondering. e3, and black plays e6. This is a system of the white pieces that I've never been a huge fan of myself. Nothing wrong with it. Many people play it, and it's perfectly acceptable. This is called the Kali system. I just don't like it because I don't like how it blocks in the bishop early. You wind up being able to 3-amp this dark square bishop later, but it's just not quite for me. Right here, what I play as black is I usually play bishop to f5 to kind of counter the idea that white has of wanting to put his bishop on d3 immediately. And that can sometimes mess with the plan that white's used to. In this game, black plays e6 though. Okay. Bishop d3 and c5, c3, and then here black makes a move I consider an inaccuracy. c4. This isn't the best idea because this pawn on c5 was putting pressure on the d4 square. Now, with c4 being played, it kind of gives up that tension that the black pieces once had on the center. And so it kind of gives up a bit of the control there. Bishop to e2, bishop d6, knight f3, continuing to develop. And then b3, c takes b3, a takes b3. And this is another downside to when black had played c4. Because now, white has a much better pawn structure. All these pawns that white has form one central pawn mass. And with all of your pawns are all connected like that, that's better than, say, what black has where he has multiple pawn islands, since they're separated by this file. So that makes the black pawn slightly less structurally sound. The other part is that this c pawn that was on c4 was basically traded for the pawn that was on a2. So the c pawn was a little bit more valuable when it was putting pressure on the center, whereas this pawn on a2 really wasn't very valuable. Okay. And one last thing is now this rook on a1 is already on an open file. So all those few things make it slightly better for white because all those small things get added up. Okay, a5, c4, and there we go, yet another advantage for white due to that pawn trade. Now he gets c4 in, and he gets better control of the center. Okay, then bishop takes b4 and a takes b4. And now black's pawn structure gets even a little bit more messed up because these pawns are now doubled and isolated. Yeah, so all those small advantages are adding up. And here what I probably would have done is, in the game bishop takes c4 was played, I probably would have captured back with the pawn just to keep all of my pawns together, because they would be a little bit more stronger when they're all together. After bishop takes c4, this pawn on b3 is kind of sitting by itself. And also, if the pawn moves towards the center, the more it can control the center. A pawn on c4 will have a little bit more say because it could control d5. Usually, each pawn, the closer it is to the center, it becomes a little bit more valuable. And so, pawn on c4 may be worth slightly more than a pawn on b3. A pawn on b3 is probably worth slightly more than a pawn on, say, a3 or a2, because it can control more squares that are valuable. Rook takes a1, queen takes a1, both sides castle, queen d6, h3. I don't know if this was necessary yet, as there's no real threats from black. I probably would have just gone ahead and played e4 and gotten on with controlling the center. Knight c6, and now here we see e4. e5, probably not the best idea for black, as white could just go ahead and capture on e5 and win a pawn. Or, as in the game, play d5, and now he does have the passed pawn. Knight d4, knight takes d4, e takes e4, and now white winds up a pawn. Bishop d7, rook e1, queen e7, e5, and now these pawns are looking pretty dangerous. b5 and knight to f3. I probably would have just gone ahead with d6 and gotten in that move with the tempo on the queen, because these pawns are getting pretty close to the queening squares. And pawn on d6, you know, only 2 squares left to go, and I could get d6 in with tempo. That's something I probably would have considered. B takes c4, e takes f6, and queen takes f6, and queen takes c4. And so, right here, now this pawn actually isn't quite as strong as it used to be, because now it's not a protected passed pawn. You know, what I would have done is I probably would have recaptured with this pawn, and now I have 2 connected passed pawns. 2 connected pawns are much more powerful than just 1 pawn, because these pawns, you know, one can protect the other, and so these 2 pawns like this would have been much more powerful. So that's probably something I would have done. Okay, back to the game. Queen takes c4. Yeah, and so now this pawn is, yes, it doesn't have any other pawns of black's in front of it, but it isn't protected by a pawn, and so it is isolated, making it a little bit weaker. Okay, bishop takes h3, g takes h3, and we see some removing the defender going on. Queen c6, queen takes h3, rook e8, g6, rook takes a f8, king takes f8, queen d6 check, king to g7, queen e5, h6, queen f4, and now white picks up an extra pawn, or rather no, he picks back up the pawn, since now there's 3 pawns for each side. And right here, this position's fairly equal, but I'd say it's slightly better for white because his pawns are farther advanced. And so now it's actually starting to get a little bit, continues to get a little bit better for white each move here. And actually there was a missed mate here. Queen to h8 would have been checkmate because this pawn on f4 takes away g5. So yeah, something you need to watch out for, even if you're marching your pawns. If you see a checkmate in 1, you can end the game instantly. Okay. But that happens to all of us in our games. Okay, g5, f takes g5, king takes g5, b6, h4, b7, queen captures the pawn, and after d7 and h3, black resigns, because white's just going to go ahead and queen this pawn next move. I think the thing that you could probably look at the most is your pawn structure. If you can really take a look at your pawns and really know how to use them and spend time learning about pawn structure, that would probably help you more than you would imagine in your games. It's something that people often neglect, just how valuable pawns are. You know, when they're starting to learn chess, they kind of forget about them. But there's actually even a saying about pawns. pawns are the souls of chess, which is very true because pawns actually can play a very big part in your game. And so I recommend that you go and take a deep look at pawn structure and how to fully utilize it. And then you will see a great improvement in your games. Okay, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.